It's Friday, November 15th, 2024. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Grant Herms. Today on the show, Donald Trump is nominating or appointing people to his cabinet or to agencies at lightning speed. And we're talking about some of the biggest positions in his next administration. Now, some of these are fairly normal choices, or at least what passes for normal in this day and age, while others, many others, range from pretty out there to downright troubling. Also, no guest this week. There was just too much to talk about this week, so you'll get a bunch of me today, and I've got some housekeeping about the show at the very end of this episode, so stick around for that. But first, let's get to your headlines. On Monday, NASA released the most detailed images of Jupiter yet. And now, I know this may not seem like huge news, but a lot of this episode is going to be kind of a bummer, so let's start light, shall we? Anyway, these images were from the Juno Jupiter probe mission that did a flyby of our solar system's largest planet back on October 23rd. Now, these images, which were then enhanced by what NASA is calling citizen scientists, so essentially they put this out to folks who then face-tuned Jupiter. But they're images that better show the storms on Jupiter and the contrasting bands of gases. The probe also took images of Jupiter's potato-shaped moon, Amalthea. Now, these images are expected to better help scientists learn more about our galactic neighborhood and better inform future missions to the outer reaches of our solar system. Unfortunately, however, Juno won't survive this mission. The probe is already on an extended mission and is set to plunge into the crushingly dense gases of Jupiter sometime next year. I envy it. On Tuesday, a Massachusetts Air National Guard member who stole and posted military secrets online was sentenced to 15 years in prison in what's being called one of the most damaging leaks in American history. 22-year-old Jack Teixeira was working at a Cape Cod air base and was somehow able to access top-secret information about the war in Ukraine and then was sharing those secrets on the social media platform Discord. He was sharing them in a group that was popular with anti-government and pro-gun rights advocates before those secrets started to spread on social media outlets popular with Russians. Teixeira's leak has raised numerous questions about how someone at such a low level in the National Guard or the Air National Guard was able to access top-secret information, how our national secrets are being safeguarded in general, and whether there are just too many people who have security clearances, something that I've talked about before on the Make It Make Sense Substack. On Wednesday, we got new numbers from the Consumer Price Index, the measure of inflation on our economy. According to the Bureau of Labor, the CPI rose 2.6% compared to the same time last year, and when you break it down to food and energy, so gas and groceries, it was up 3.3%. Now, those numbers are a sign that inflation is still a thorn in the side of the Biden administration and the Federal Reserve, which has been lowering interest rates as inflation has cooled from where it was during the pandemic. Now, this report is also not welcome news for the incoming Trump administration either, where Trump's tax and tariff plans have already begun to worry the money markets in our country and abroad, because those plans are expected to slow the recovery from post-pandemic inflation, if not make it worse, and those things are happening before Trump is even taking office. Finally, on Thursday, scientists announced they discovered the largest living creature on planet Earth, living in the South Pacific near the Solomon Islands. That creature is a single colony of coral that is longer than 2 basketball courts, larger than a blue whale. Now, I know what you're thinking. How is a colony a single organism? I don't know. It feels like cheating to me too, but take it up with the scientists. Anyway, it's a massive discovery, literally and figuratively. The coral colony is so big that you can see it from space. Now, there's nothing more about this than I just thought it was pretty neat and something that is just kind of fun to know that there are still things to discover left. Also, I thought it might sound kind of nice to at least think about spending some time near a tropical coral reef. And when you get overwhelmed with our main topic this week, just think coral reef. And with that, let's get to our main topic this week. Trump is putting together his cabinet, and his choices are stunning people across the political spectrum. In the hours and practically minutes after Donald Trump won the presidency, jockeying for who was going to be in his cabinet was already happening at Mar-a-Lago. This is something that I talked a little bit about last week. Hundreds of contenders descended on Trump's resort. Many were already there for election night, and the Trump team was already putting together a list of people that they thought Trump would like. And according to Axios, how Trump is choosing his nominees is entirely unconventional, largely devoid of expertise, and extremely Trump. And I'm going to be running down the list of nominations and appointments Trump has made so far, which he has been making at breakneck pace. But I think before I do that, it's important to understand how Trump is making these decisions. So I'll explain the why as we go. So Axios put out a report this week saying Trump has made a makeshift situation room at Mar-a-Lago surrounded by TVs and monitors that are showing him profiles of potential picks for whatever position he's looking at in that moment. Now, those profiles and dossiers that have been put together are also a number of TV clips so that Trump can see how well his potential pick would do on TV delivering his message, and if they fit what he's taken to calling the central casting for that position. It's something that Trump has talked about a lot when he talks about the image of people, and he clearly thinks about it a lot. And what that generally means for Donald Trump when it comes to men is if they fit this authoritative, seeming, fitting vision of what Trump thinks of when he thinks of whatever department or agency he's looking at this person for, and if it's women, it's generally women he just finds attractive and would like to be seen with, but not necessarily outshone by. The whole thing has sort of a Roger Ailes-ness about it. Ailes was the founder of Fox News, for those of you who don't know, and he used to turn off the sound on audition tapes that were sent to Fox by journalists, generally the women, to see if they were worth watching, not necessarily listening to. It was all about the image, and that is what Trump is looking for with these picks. We also know who's in the room with Trump. Apart from his new chief of staff, it seems that J.D. Vance is there, which makes sense. If something should happen to Trump, Vance would also need to be behind these picks for what would then be his administration. We also learned that Elon Musk is in the room too, which Musk, who I'll be talking about later, has been setting himself up to be one of Trump's closest advisors, and that started to irk some of the Trump world staffers. So, if that's the how, let's talk about the who. And so far, this is a long list that Trump has made, an extraordinary amount of appointments so far. So let's just stick to the department heads. In the coming weeks, I'll be breaking down each department and each issue that these departments are overseeing and what we can expect in 2025. So let's start at least simple right now. Trump made his first appointment in the 48 hours after Election Day, which is so little time it practically caught everyone off guard. The choice itself, although, wasn't altogether unsurprising. Trump chose his campaign manager, Susie Wiles, to be his chief of staff. Wiles is a longtime Republican operative and a consultant who has become a stalwart MAGA member, despite being an establishment Republican for most of her life. She's from Florida and worked for Ron DeSantis, Trump's on-again, off-again, and then very much off-again protege, who handily won his race for governor after Wiles was flown in to help him win in the final months of the campaign. DeSantis then ousted Wiles after he won that race. Now, she later went on to say that working for DeSantis was one of the worst mistakes of her career. She ran Trump's Florida campaign in 2020 before moving on to run his political action committee after he lost in 2020 until this campaign where she co-managed it alongside Chris LaCivita, who was then booted from the campaign before Election Day. That's a lot of inside baseball. Don't worry a lot about some of that stuff. Wiles is described as being disciplined and running a tight ship, things that are essentially required to do the job of chief of staff, because the chief of staff runs the White House. They're gatekeepers of information to the president, most importantly. They help set the schedule in a form or fashion. They run the staff. They make sure that everyone is on message and on task, and they're in every meeting with the president and are often required to have much more knowledge of any given issue than the president might be presented with in that moment. They're also in charge of breaking news to the president and is often their closest confidant. Wiles, like I said, is a MAGA insider and will certainly serve to do all of those things, but was also the architect of letting Trump off the leash in the last little bit of the campaign while holding down the fort behind the scenes, so we could expect likely a lot of that in the future. I also don't want to gloss over the fact here that Wiles would also be the first woman to be chief of staff in either party. The next pick was also an internal pick for Trump, and that was Trump's deputy chief of staff, which will be Stephen Miller. I've talked about Miller before on the show. He is the anti-immigration extremist who has pretty clear white supremacy ideology, but is also Trump's longest-serving senior staff member. Now, if you forgot who Miller was or you weren't a listener yet, Miller during 2015 and 2016 was a part of the Trump camp and then the Trump administration. The Southern Poverty Law Center, one of the largest civil rights organizations in the country that also tracks hate groups and hate leaders, did an entire expose on Miller. And they found that Miller had been sending white supremacist reading material and links to white supremacist websites to the far-right outlet Breitbart, including a novel popular with neo-Nazis for its depiction of minority groups, quote, replacing whites, called The Camp of Saints, which is some of the most vile stuff that I have ever read in my entire life. He also pushed racist biology, known as eugenics, that says people of color are genetically inferior to white people. Now, his new position, the deputy chief of staff, does a lot of things that the chief of staff does, like the gatekeeping of information, and usually they have a policy area or areas of expertise, but are also sort of jacks of all trades. Miller, however, will be, by title, Trump's national policy advisor as well, but in actuality will be in charge of carrying out Trump's mass deportation immigration plan. Miller was instrumental in getting Trump's Muslim ban put in place in his first administration. He was key in helping Trump devise the child separation policy and at least nominally trying to find ways to get Trump's border wall built. Obviously, that never happened. He also pushed hard to get a proposal to limit green cards to legal immigrants who used services like food stamps, Medicaid, or housing vouchers, and to deny green cards to those who might potentially someday need those services. Miller has essentially said that he is obsessed with stopping asylum seekers from coming over the border, telling the New Yorker, "This is all I care about. I don't have a family. I don't have anything else. This is my life." So he is going to be singularly focused on Trump's mass deportation plan and will likely be a face and voice on cable TV and in articles because unlike Wiles, who likes to be behind the scenes, he won't be. He likes fighting with the press, and Trump likes that about him, even though he doesn't fit the sort of like Hollywood star central casting look that Trump likes. And while we're talking about immigration, let's move to Trump's choice to lead the Department of Homeland Security, who is right out of central casting, at least for Trump, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. So Noem has no immigration, intelligence, military, or private security experience. She is the governor of a sparsely populated, landlocked, borderless state, but nonetheless will be in charge of the department in charge of the border. She was a member of Congress from 2011 to 2019, where of the 804 bills she introduced, just 16 of them were related in some way to immigration, and out of all of those bills, just 50 of them became law, giving her a 6% success rate. She made her name being a diehard Trump supporter first in Congress, who then specifically backed Trump's harshest immigration plans when she became governor of South Dakota, and she's made spectacles of her own, including a $1 million deployment of National Guard troops to the Texas-Mexico border that was mostly paid for by a billionaire donor from Tennessee when Texas was illegally setting border policy in 2022. She called Mexico a war zone and offered to drive razor wire to the southern border herself, and she vowed not to allow undocumented immigrants into South Dakota, though it's practically impossible to stop that, and she didn't. Her biggest thing for Trump is that she's an attractive woman who is a fan favorite with Trump's mostly male base and Fox News' male audience, and she's likely going to be a voice to both toe the line but also put a softer face to some of Trump's harshest policies. She was also on the shortlist to be Trump's vice president, but it came out that in her own memoir, Noam wrote a story about shooting a family puppy and a family goat and then leaving those carcasses in a gravel pit after they misbehaved. And it's a story that aides reportedly begged her not to put in this book, and they had gotten her to keep it out of her previous political memoir, but she just really wanted to tell this story, and all that negative press soured her for Trump, at least from being his running mate. Now, there's more to her, but we'll leave that for another episode. From there, let's go to the Department of Defense, the 3 million person department with an $850 billion budget and the strongest military in human history. Trump has tapped Fox News host Pete Hegseth to be the Secretary of Defense. Hegseth is the host of Fox and Friends Weekends. He's also an Army National Guard veteran who saw combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he has in the past said that vets using the VA need some personal integrity and has been a forceful supporter for Trump both on and off air. He's also accused the current military of being too diverse and said that women shouldn't serve in combat. Here he is saying that on a podcast.
Straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective, hasn't made us more lethal, has made fighting more complicated.
Like I said before, there is more to Hegseth in these areas about how he views the current state of the military and the military's current actions and operations, but we'll get into that in a later episode. For Trump, Hegseth is seen as a good messenger for what Trump will want him to do, and he really got on Trump's good side after lobbying for pardons for several military members who were accused of or charged with what amounted to war crimes, and Trump did end up pardoning those men. Now, generally, the Secretaries of Defense, while it is a civilian job, are people with some sort of military or service background, and usually, though, that is at higher levels because the job of Secretary of Defense isn't a battlefield position, it's an administrative one that requires people to be able to lead a department that big and its military arsenal while also bridging the divide between not just soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines and Coast Guard members, but also civilians who work in the Department of Defense. And those are real operations that they're involved in. It's not just people who work desk jobs. And nothing about Hegseth's background suggests that he's even capable of doing something like that, even if he gets approved by the Senate, because the reactions to him have not been great, including this one from Senate moderate Lisa Murkowski from Alaska.
Just announced that he's nominating Pete Hegseth, the Fox News host, as the Secretary of Defense.
Wow.
What are your thoughts on that?
I just said wow.
Is that like a surprising wow? Is that do you think it's a good choice?
Well, no, I'm just surprised. I'm not going to comment whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just surprised because the names that I've heard for Secretary of Defense have not included him. So that's just kind of, I guess, wow.
I think that would be hard to confirm.
I don't know.
So, yeah. And there's also been some pretty big pushback from military leaders as well to this nomination. And we'll talk about Senate confirmation in a little bit in this episode, because for all of these departments I'll be talking about, they need to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. From there, we should talk about the Department of State, the people who run the diplomacy, so the other side of the coin from the Department of Defense. Trump has nominated Marco Rubio. The Florida senator was once a chief rival of Trump's in 2016, and he was a never-Trump guy for a little bit during the first administration. He's also somebody who has worked on immigration and is a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee right now, as well as the Intelligence Committee. So, all things considered here, Rubio is an extremely normal pick for this job. In terms of why Trump likes him, well, like I said, he used to be a never-Trump guy, but recently Rubio has come out as a fighter for Trump in TV and other interviews. He's a guy who has a relationship particularly with Fox News, which Trump watches exclusively. And he's come out as someone who wants to draw harder lines against China and Iran, both things that Trump wants. So if that's the stuff abroad, let's talk about some domestic things here. The Departments of Veterans Affairs, Interior, and Health and Human Services. Trump has tapped former Representative Doug Collins to lead the VA. Collins is a chaplain in the Air Force Reserve and was also at one point Trump's pick to be the head of the CIA, even though Collins took himself out of the running for that. And probably most important for Trump, Collins was one of the people who defended Trump during his first impeachment, which really is the operative thing for Trump here. He wants loyalty, and the head of the VA is seen as sort of a lesser-than department head position. We can talk about the merits of that later. When it comes to the Department of the Interior, which is one of these departments that people don't think about very often, but is really big and really influential, it's the department in charge of the national parks, of Indian Affairs, of mining, and the U.S. Geological Survey. So we are talking about, like, who gets to mine for minerals or drill for oil. That's a lot of that, in any way, is done under the Department of the Interior, which sounds, like I said, nerdy, but it's important. Well, last night, Trump made a surprise announcement at Mar-a-Lago that he was going to be naming North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum to be Secretary of the Interior, so which means we'll have both Dakotas represented in this new administration between him and Nome. Here's how Trump made that announcement.
We have a big announcement, and I won't tell you the name of his, the exact name. I think he's an incredible person. He's got an unbelievably wonderful wife named Catherine. So I won't tell you his name. Might be something like Burgum. He's from North Dakota. He's going to be announced tomorrow for a very big position. So everybody's waiting. There he is. Hi, Doug. He's going to be announced tomorrow, and we have somebody.
So I know what I said about Susie Wiles keeping Trump on a little bit of a leash or letting him off, but keeping everything on the rails. These nominations lately seem to undermine some of that. We'll get into more of that coming up. But let's get back to Burgum here. He was on the short list of Trump's vice presidential picks as well, because he's a billionaire who made his money in software and then investments. And it was appealing to Trump to have somebody who was personally that wealthy as his running mate. Now, Burgum has come out as a forceful supporter of Trump, although he's far less a fighter in that way. He's just kind of a bland dude. But obviously what Trump expects Burgum to do is to open up a lot of federal land, as Trump promised to do during his campaign, to oil and gas and mining companies, which is something that environmentalists and conservationists across the political spectrum have fought against for a long time. Burgum seems poised to do those things. Then it is the Health and Human Services Department, and Trump did as he promised, naming Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to lead the department with a $2 trillion budget. Now, there is a lot to say about RFK Jr., and I will be saying a lot of it in an upcoming episode, but RFK Jr. is an anti-vaccine conspiracy theorist who has pushed the idea that vaccines cause autism and mercury poisoning, which they don't. He's vowed to remove fluoride from America's water systems, which have been there for 80 years and have been proven to improve dental health, one of the leading ways to stave off other life-threatening conditions like heart disease. He also believes that there are chemicals in the water that are turning children gay, and has dabbled in the chemtrails conspiracy that the government is spraying Americans with chemicals dropped from planes. He also believes that antidepressants are causing mass shootings and that COVID was both engineered in the lab and was designed to make sure that Jews and Asians were immune to it. The first and the third one obviously are not true, and the middle one there has never been proven. He's also promised to go after makers of things like Doritos and Fruit Loops and Diet Coke, which Trump loves because of the chemicals and things that he believes are toxins that are in them. Now, Trump has promised RFK Jr. to go, quote, wild on vaccines, despite Trump overseeing the most successful vaccine development in human history with Operation Warp Speed during the pandemic that developed the COVID vaccine. Just this nomination alone sent stocks for major pharmaceutical companies plunging. And now, I am not one to say woe is me about these massive pharma giants, but with drops like these, we are talking about a lot of money. And these are people's retirements, their investments, their jobs, their livelihoods, and their lives all wrapped up in these massive companies. And if just naming a dude can do that, it's not great to think about what will happen when he actually gets the job. Okay, there are just a few more names here. Stick with me. Next, we have Matt Gaetz to be the Attorney General and run the Department of Justice. Those of you who are Substack subscribers got a bit of this on Wednesday when Trump made the announcement that the now former Florida congressman would be his AG pick. Gaetz is an attorney, I guess, by degree, but is absolutely scandal-ridden. He was the subject of a federal investigation over whether he trafficked a 17-year-old across state lines to have sex with her while also using illegal drugs. He is currently the subject of a House committee ethics probe that was supposed to be released today, but the House committee investigating canceled its meeting because Republican senators want to see that report, although because he resigned, it's unlikely he'll face any accountability at all. Now, in that report, according to sources talking to the ABC News, that 17-year-old told this House Ethics Committee that she and Gaetz did, in fact, sleep together. Gaetz, like I said, resigned from the House on Wednesday, just 2 days before that report was supposed to come out, and he is not well liked by his colleagues. Here's Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullin talking about Gaetz last year.
You got to think about this guy. This is a guy that the media didn't give a time of day to after he was accused of sleeping with an underage girl. And there's a reason why no one in the conference came and defended him, because we had all seen the videos he was showing on the House floor that all of us had walked away of the girls that he had slept with. He'd brag about how he would crush ED medicine and chase it with an energy drink so he could go all night. This is obviously before you got married.
So, ew. And there's more to those stories, but like I said, we'll get into a lot of these things, Gaetz included, in a future episode. Anyway, Trump likes Gaetz because he's been a militant supporter to the point where Gaetz showed up at Trump's trial in New York and has shown a willingness to attack Trump's political opponents in a way that really appeals to Trump. Gaetz may have been handed the most important nomination to Trump because I think beyond the promises of mass deportation, Trump's real vision is to get revenge on his political enemies, and Gaetz will be all too happy to help him do that. And do it under the guise of it being legal no matter what. Finally, and mercifully here in this episode, Trump announced that he was going to appoint Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to co-lead a brand new department called the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which is the same name of Elon Musk's cryptocurrency Dogecoin, which is named after a meme. It is incredibly stupid. It's pretty unclear what this department would do, other than that Musk has said he wants to go through each government agency almost every day, asking people what they got done that day. And then he wants to cut $2 trillion from the federal budget. From where? We don't know. The plan hasn't started great. So first off, it seems a little inefficient for the Department of Efficiency to have two leaders at the same time. And then on X, the brand new handle and account for this department that doesn't even exist yet, said that it wants super high IQ small government revolutionaries willing to work 80 plus hours a week to apply by sending in DMs to the account, which again feels wildly inefficient. That being said, Trump can't just create a new department. Only Congress can do that, so it's not like Musk and Ramaswamy could get to work right away, at least not with the full force of a brand new agency. Okay, that is it for the names. Take a deep breath here. I know that was a lot. We've just got a little bit more to do, and I promise I'll be putting up a cheat sheet on all this on the Substack because this is only going to get longer, and there are some names that I left out too. The next step here is if these people can even be confirmed to their positions. That is one of the most important things the Senate does. It's what's known as the advise and consent clause of the Constitution, which the Senate has to confirm a president's nominees for his cabinet or an agency post, almost all of them except for his personal staff. Now, right now, Trump might not get everything that he wants. This week, GOP senators chose South Dakota Senator John Thune to be the new Senate leader, which means this has got to be the biggest week for South Dakota or both the Dakotas since they unveiled Mount Rushmore. Either way, Thune is an establishment Republican as much as any exist anymore in the Republican Party, and was not Trump's personal choice to be Senate leader. He wanted Florida Senator Rick Scott. Now, Thune and Trump have clashed in recent years and are said to have buried the hatchet, but Trump holds a grudge. Trump has already demanded that the Senate allow for what's known as recess appointments, which are what they sound like, that the Senate just signs off carte blanche on allowing a president to put his nominees in their jobs to get to work right away instead of waiting to be confirmed. Now, this is something that's in the Constitution, and it was written there because the Senate wasn't expected to be in session practically year-round like it is now when the Constitution was written, and it also would take people weeks or months to ride in on horseback to govern. So to make sure the government could run smoothly and function all the time, recess nominations and recess appointments were just built into the whole process. It's an antiquated notion now that Trump wants to use as an end run around the Senate, and at first glance, it seemed like he might get his wish, but with appointments like Hegseth, RFK Jr., and Gates, senators have started to push back. All of that has set up fighting within the GOP, like I just said already, between Trump and the hardliners and the less hardliners. Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Trump favorite and partner in metaphorical crime with Matt Gaetz, warned senators they'd have to deal with Trump and Elon Musk's money if they didn't do what the president-elect wanted. Here she is saying that.
And what if Senate Republicans don't confirm him?
Well, then they have to deal with Donald Trump, and they'll have to deal with Elon Musk and his great new PAC. So, and the American people, this is a mandate.
And then there's the question that whether a lot of these people could even pass background checks. Obviously, Gates, who's been under federal investigation for sex trafficking, would have some trouble, but also Hegseth and RFK Jr., who have frequently spouted Russian-friendly talking points and have, let's say, dubious finances. Noem as well was caught up in a couple different ethics scandals of her own. And because of that, under the guise of expediency, Trump advisors have floated the idea of not having the FBI do background checks, instead outsourcing that to private companies. And the Trump transition has blown through security and ethics violation deadlines, including signing documents disclosing potential conflicts of interest. Now, those aren't required to be signed, but, it feels like they should. So after all that and all the stuff I just said, what's the takeaway here? Well, a lot of these picks are meant to rattle cages and ruffle feathers. It's a own the libs kind of a thing, piss off the Democrats kind of a thing. But it's also more than that, and I want you to hear it from Texas Representative Troy Nehls.
There's no question he's the leader of our party. So now he's got a mission statement, his mission, and his goals and objectives, whatever that is, we need to embrace it. All of it. Every single word. If Donald Trump says jump 3 feet high and scratch your head, we all jump 3 feet high and scratch our heads. That's it.
So that's the ball game here. It's that Trump is picking people based on loyalty. It's the thing he said about Hitler's generals, that he needed ultimate, undying, unyielding loyalty to him and only him. It's the only thing that will matter to him in this coming administration. And as shocking as some of these picks might be, it's the message that they're sending not just to members of the party to get in line or to get out of the way, but to the country that is what the president will value in office is just this thing. And that is going to send shockwaves through every part of American life. And that, mercifully, is it for this episode. If you're still listening, thank you so much for sticking with this whole thing. I want to talk a little bit about that housekeeping now, because I'm going to be shifting some of the focus in these full episodes to departments and issues and the transition into a new Trump administration over the next few weeks. I'm going to be adding in another longer-ish episode, so not a mini, but not necessarily a full one. You're not going to get an interview in those. That'll happen on Wednesdays, because partly I just couldn't stay away, partly because the news is moving so fast, a little bit because I kind of like doing the daily podcast, but it's just so much work that when I got done after the election, I basically slept for a full 36 hours. Anyway, you'll see those in your feed coming down on Wednesdays, and then the full episodes always on Fridays. And with that, please rate and review the show on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on. Like and subscribe and hit that bell for notifications on YouTube to make sure you don't miss out on those new Wednesday, Friday episode splits. Also, subscribe to the Make It Make Sense Substack. I'm going to be putting up more of these daily articles and new things. Like I said, that cheat sheet will be up this weekend on the Substack, but that'll be just for paid subscribers. It's just $5 a month or $50 for the entire year. And as always, share the show on social media. It's MIMS News Pod. That's MIMS News Pod. It's all one word on every platform. I am at Grant Herms on X and at Grant Herms TV on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Herms, and I'll talk to you next week.